on the Queen's Gambit. For those of you that have seen it before or are here to learn more about it before you do watch it on Netflix. But before we get into that, I just wanted to say welcome again. I'm Marcie, Keithley, your host, along with Jennifer Falsing and Pam Krosky in the Zoom room helping out. We're just glad everyone's here. We hope everybody had a great holiday and is ready to relax and connect with some of your friends and learn more about the Queen's Gambit. So with that, we're going to just get a couple of housekeeping items out of the way first, and also let you know a little bit more about us in case you're visiting us for the very first time. We are Indiana Adoptee Network. Don't let the name fool you. We do have participation from globally, but we do host an annual conference in Indianapolis each year, which has been postponed, and we'll be doing it virtually in May. We partner with other nonprofits. We support adoptee rights. We have a newsletter. Just a lot there. Assist with search, first contact, and DNA. And we are all, the three of us are available for speaking engagements. The next one. Okay.
Want me to do it?
Go ahead, Pam.
All righty. Participants are asked to remain muted and may unlock their microphone during the Q&A when recognized. You may raise your hand virtually on the screen or by posting in the chat. This is a public meeting with no guarantee that the information or identity is confidential. The presentation portion of this event is recorded and shared on our YouTube channel. We do not record the Q&A. Actually, tonight, that is different. We are going to be recording the entire event, so just know that the whole portion is recorded tonight. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thoughts, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255.
Thank you, Pam.
You are welcome.
And normally we only record the presentation of our spotlight guest, but tonight, because it's very engaging, we're going to be recording the whole entire episode. So we just want to remind you all of that again. So with that, I will go ahead and turn this over to Lynn and Laureen, and we'll start the conversation about the Queen's Gambit. But I have one comment. I read something online that I thought was really interesting about the Queen's Gambit. And it says it's been viewed by 62 million people.
Wow.
The producer, Alan Scott, is on BBC News talking about how it took 30 years with 9 rewrites. And every studio he showed it to said no one would be interested in this in chess.
Wow.
So he was basically saying, you know, don't give up on your dream, just keep going. Can you imagine 30 years for your dream? 62 million people.
That's great. That's great. And I get that. I get that too, because, you know, I can see a lot of people think, well, who's gonna be interested in a story about chess and this woman, you know, chess player. But really, that's when I started watching it, or when I watched the trailers for it, and I watched there were several trailers for it, and heard from friends, oh, you've got to watch it, it's really good. No one told me that the main character was an adoptee. I started watching it and discovered that, and kind of, I don't remember if it was the first or second episode when she got adopted, but I remember realizing she's an adoptee. This is interesting. And I remember thinking inwardly, kind of rolling my eyes going, is this going to be just like a lot of the other Hollywood portrayals of adoptees and, you know, kind of the candy coated version of adoption is best, and oh, she's going to have a better life once she's adopted, and or her troubles are related to adoption, which they were, but they dealt with them in a real way, I think. And so I started watching it. The rest of it, I was watching it with my husband, and it was interesting because as I'm watching it, we get further and further into the series, and I started blurting out these things that kind of alarmed him. I mean, he didn't know what I was talking about. I mean, I'm watching it and I'm watching with my husband and I'm yelling out, oh, detachment. That's classic detachment, adoptee detachment. And I'm watching it, another episode, and it's like, well, she's mirroring, you know, she has no biological family to mirror after. She's, you know, mirroring people that she's close to or trying to. She doesn't have her own identity. And I'm saying these things out loud and my husband's just looking at me like, wow. You know, when we talk about each episode afterwards, and we would talk about the chest and wow, really, really cool, interesting, the costumes, all of that stuff that's really cool to watch for the period that they were in the 50s and 60s. And but for me, I kept watching it because I was really interested in the accuracy of her characterization as an adoptee. And I was kind of curious throughout as to her reactions and how they were going to be portrayed. So how we want to do this, a discussion, Lynn and I, we both got together. Well, at first we got together after watching the series, and just as a couple of friends talking about it, we text each other and go, hey, let's talk about the Queen's Gambit today. So we realized after talking about it a few times that, you know, maybe other adoptees might be interested in talking about this. So we decided to do this discussion, and so I'm glad you guys are all here. And I think most of you have watched it. We had there was a comment in the that didn't watched it yet, but I think it'll still be interesting to listen to the discussion. But how we want to do this is we're going to throw out some of the themes that were in the series and how some of the adoption themes or themes that we relate to adoption. That was my focus in the show. So I'm sure it was yours, or maybe it wasn't yours. That'd be interesting to hear too. But then we wanted to deal with each theme and then throw it out to you guys and see what your thoughts are about that. So those are kind of my first impressions about the show and why I started watching and how I got hooked. You know, they just didn't candy coat the adoptee issues, and they dealt with them, I think, in a very realistic way. Lynn, do you want to talk about your first impressions, or what were your thoughts on that? I know you had some ideas too about when it.
Yeah, I hadn't watched it, but people kept recommending it to me. You were one of them, Laureen, and I think you were the one that kept saying, have you watched it yet? Have you watched it yet? And so I watched it by myself the first time through. And then when I knew we were going to do this discussion, I thought I better watch this again because you were picking up on some things that I hadn't noticed so much. And I think I had picked up on some stuff that you hadn't because we were comparing notes. So the second time I watched it with my husband, and him being a non-adoptee had some kind of interesting observations. One of them was that the orphanage was very military style. You know, how all of her personal belongings were taken from her and she was put in these different clothes. And, you know, there were just all these really strict rules. So things that I didn't really pay much attention to, he did. So I jotted down a whole bunch of notes the second time I watched it. So anyway, I thought it was great. I love what you shared, Marcie. And I remember reading another article that chess sets are up in sales by about 800%. And I personally bought a chess set for my birthday in December. And then I bought my son one for Christmas because he kept borrowing mine. So we're both really playing chess now. So that was kind of also another outcome of the series. It reminded me of my love of chess that I learned when I was a child. So
I learned it in 6th grade.
Oh, did you?
Uh-huh.
So is anybody in the room chess players?
Sort of.
Anybody? Raise your hands. Not really? Did you find, though, that it was still pretty fascinating the way they honed in on all the moves? And I just thought they did it so well, the way they, you know, made you like really love chess. All the terminology totally went over my head, but I still thought it was really fascinating.
Yeah, they did a great job with that because I was fascinated. I was riveted each moment, each detail. So, yeah.
Phil, you have your hand up?
Oh, yeah. I used to play seriously. I wasn't rated, but it was very accurate.
Really?
I've only seen a couple. I'm really into it, but I avoided it because it kind of the first episode brought up a lot of kind of stuff. So, but I'm enjoying it now. It's kind of gotten moving a bit.
Yeah.
And the first episode is pretty dark.
Yes, it's hard to get past the first. My son watched it and he's like, he came in the middle later because he's got a low attention span and he only got to the second episode and gave up on it. But then he came in when I was in the middle. He's like, oh, this is really good. Yeah, but it's kind of draggy in the beginning.
I don't know about you guys, but sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say that I was waiting for the shoe, the typical shoe to drop. When was she going to be abused? Who was going to be
Yes.
the first adult to let her down? What was going to be the first reaction she was going to have that made her maladaptive? I was, and then also with the adoptive mom, I was waiting for the same thing. So I had a lot of tension looking at this whole series. So maybe if I look at it again the second time, or it might not be so intense for me. But yeah. Anybody else felt that way?
The second time, I felt more detached. Speaking of detachment, which we're going to talk about, but I felt a little more emotionally detached the second time around and was able to really notice things I missed the first time. David?
I agree with Barbara. It was very suspense-filled and very tense for me too. I was waiting for bad things to happen, but I think that was already telegraphed to us in the beginning, right? I mean, from the moment that team of social workers at the orphanage was meeting and they were talking about the father's unknown, he was a victim of a carefree life, and then we later found out that really wasn't the case, but that was their attitude, right? That this is the typical orphan coming into our orphanage, and they even called her a poor dear. And my wife saw me, I almost jumped out of my chair, right? I thought, okay, this is setting this up for a real adoption and orphan story, right? I mean, that wasn't just by accident. That was exactly what happened. And then when she admitted to that facility, and I'm looking at my notes because I had to write it down. The director of the facility said, you'll find a good life here, a better life than you might have had. And of course, I was off to the races in my mind thinking, oh my gosh, that is exactly the sign of the
Tagline, right?
The party line.
adoptee world, and that's exactly what her experience was going to be. So Barbara, you're right to have been tense because they set it up to be that way. It was going to be tense because of the attitudes of the professionals at that time.
That's a great point. In fact, I really could identify just from everything most of us here experienced in the baby scoop era, how it related to the attitudes of that orphanage.
Yeah, the adoptee norms. In fact, that's the first theme that we have to discuss. The adoptee norms and how that was portrayed. And David, you kind of said it all. I mean, at the orphanage, adoption was the goal. That was the goal for everybody. You would have a better life, and then even the stereotype with Jolene. They were very clear, she was too old to be adopted. They kind of gave up on her, too old and Black. And that, that cut her chances short of being adopted. And she knew that, and everybody knew that. And they made that really clear. She was going to be a lifer at that orphanage. And we already talked about the military style at the orphanage, how they took away what she even had left of her identity by taking away her clothing and cutting her hair. And that there was a piece of clothing that was, or something that she carried, Lynn, wasn't there, that was that her mother had made for her, and that
the dress was stitched with her name, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so all of those things, the adoption norms came out at first, and it was like, wow, how is this going to end up, or how is this going to go? Is she going to be able to overcome these, these obstacles? And that's what kept me watching. So. And did anybody else focus on or find a norm or something that you related to?
Keith has his hand up.
Yeah, I was actually going to touch on the. I actually found that the way the father, the adoptive father, like treated her like she was nothing, that was a form of abuse, and then also the way the mother treated her like a prize fighter, making her even skip school to play chess. I mean, allowing for her to do that was certainly a form of abuse as well. So, even though they didn't.
I see it both ways. I feel like because she was so eager to play chess, her mom was being supportive by writing her the note. Because remember, once the father left, she would have been sent back to the orphanage had her mother not lied for her. So it was like set up, in my opinion, that it was okay to lie. Even back in the orphanage where she was expected to lie about her age to get adopted, it was set very, very early on that lying is okay and this is what we do to survive. That's kind of my view. But yeah, it's not good parenting to not send your kid to school either.
Yeah, and, you know, then again, it was back in, what do you say, maybe the 60s or something like that. So I mean, the thinking back then was probably different. I'm sure for a young lady, especially too. So, but
She had a really long case of mono.
yeah, right.
Well, she didn't fit in at school either. I mean, she didn't want to go really. I mean, she didn't have any friends there. So that kind of fell into place for her, and she just wanted the chess. That was where she felt comfortable. But yeah, how she was dealt with by her adoptive father was, I mean, obviously the adoptive father didn't want her. And so,
and he made it pretty clear. I mean, he didn't even
Yes.
try to hide it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Marla, you have something? Sorry, Laureen.
Sorry, I'm not seeing the hands. So
I can see the hands. I don't know. Maybe it's the screen that I have.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I'm still learning this too. I guess I was struck a lot by, with the adoptive mom, the girl seemed to almost be supporting her through the man leaving her and her drinking and everything else. To me, I guess maybe it's because it's my own personal trigger, but I just felt like the adoptive daughter was left to be like the head of the family. To be
Absolutely,
the one,
like a role reversal. I saw that too, for sure.
yeah. So that's
a good point. Great point.
yeah. Yeah, I guess that's what struck me a lot. Yeah.
Because I think the adoptive mother didn't have it all together. I mean, she had an alcohol problem. She struggled with depression. Her husband left her. Was she even qualified to be an adoptive parent? I would ask. Anybody else?
She was trying to adopt to keep the marriage together too. I mean, she thought this would be the answer, and he didn't want it, but he thought it would make her happy. And it did, but it didn't make the marriage work. So obviously,
right.
But yeah,
She
yeah,
damaged goods for him, to be honest. I think he didn't even, I don't think he really actually loved her, because this whole life that she had being a piano player seemed to
Yeah.
be, he didn't even like really know about that or acknowledge it. So, he had a life outside the house. He could care less about his wife. And his wife, I thought she was, and I don't mean to be harsh when I say damaged goods, but back in that time frame, that because she couldn't conceive, because she was, as a housewife, women outside of the home didn't have, they couldn't work or have property of their own or even rent a place of their own, all of that stuff. She had to rely on her husband for stuff.
Absolutely. Kelly has her hand up.
I think Miguel had his up first.
Okay. Miguel.
Yeah, sorry. I'm walking on La Brea right now, busy road. The girl totally filled needs for her parents. She was a commodity, an off-the-shelf product to fill some need for them, not being cared about as a human being. It was just like she's there to fill the need for an infertile couple. So I totally picked up on that.
Kelly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought in some ways the series was a little hard to relate to, just because her experience of adoption was so different than probably most of ours who were adopted as infants. I certainly couldn't relate to like the orphanage experience or being adopted at an older age. So I thought that was kind of different. it was more along the lines of like the Anne of Green Gables or Little Orphan Annie, sort of older adoptee story. I think it made me think, I wish there was more portrayal in the media of cases that are more typical, like most of us who were adopted as infants. And in terms of the adoptive parents, I found myself both sympathizing with the adoptive mother as well as liking her and disliking her, because while she had a lot of her own demons, like the alcoholism and addiction to, I think, benzodiazepines, she was an incredibly talented pianist. And I felt like that talent was stifled, maybe by the marriage, maybe by the era that she lived in. And I thought, despite being an alcoholic, she did the best she could with Beth, even though I agree with what someone said earlier about how depriving her of school may not have been the right decision, but I think she saw the genius in her daughter and she wanted to sort of give her the opportunity to explore that genius. And I thought in a way that she was living vicariously through her, because she saw herself like probably not being able to pursue her piano, becoming a concert pianist dreams. And maybe she wanted Beth to have the opportunities that she didn't have. But anyway.
Laureen, do you have a next theme?
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention about the mother's relationship too. I agree with what Kelly was saying. And to me, their relationship at first, I mean, I when I was discussing it with Lynn before we were going to have this discussion, I said, their relationship just seems so contrived. And Lynn said, well, I mean, it kind of had to be. They didn't know what to do. I mean, all of a sudden you've got a teenage daughter. And so yeah, I couldn't relate to it. I mean, I wasn't adopted as a teenager, but it just seemed so contrived. I think that in the show, they just did a good job of showing us how that might be. But
it was uncomfortable.
Yeah, uncomfortable. Yeah.
Awkward.
Yeah. It felt contrived, but yeah, just, I mean, I guess in real life, that would be how it is if you're adopted as a teenager into a home where, where
they're strangers, you don't know. She didn't know after coming out of an orphanage what the rules were. What are the rules here? She's used to sleeping in this room with all these other kids, and she has this whole room to herself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, our next theme that we are going to talk about is trauma. Oops, sorry about that. It may be related to Kodak. Sorry, new puppy. Trauma, PTSD, and grieving. And, I was talking about the loss. We were talking about the loss of her later in the show. And Lynn reminded me, well, she lost two mothers and also two fathers. So she had a lot of grieving to do, and how did you deal with that? Lynn, do you want to take over? I'm going to take the dog. Sorry.
Okay. So we have a list here going. So the flashbacks, I felt like they were signs of PTSD. I'm not a psychologist, but they kept showing, all those terrible things of her that she went through when her mom was what I interpreted to be committing suicide, like when she walked into the water. And something that was really triggering to me is when she took her daughter to her biological father's house, but didn't explain to her who he was. And it was obvious from the interaction the biological father had never told his wife about his previous family. That was super triggering to me. And it left Beth without really an explanation. Where's my father? Who was that man? What happened? So are you good, Laureen?
Yeah, I'm back, I think. So
you can take back over.
Well, we're talking about the flashbacks to the first mother, and not really even understanding that, like you said. For me, I felt the same way, that she was had been trying to kill herself for some time, but didn't really quite know how to go about it or what to do about about her daughter. And I think it took Beth a while to realize that. And not only did she lose her mother, but she lost any idea of having a mother, because it was almost when she realized what had happened. I mean, in the end, she tried to kill Beth as well, right, in the car. And because she didn't know what to do with her. So that grief is one thing. And then she never even gets to meet her father. So she loses a father she didn't even really know. Did she know that early on, the father wanted her, right? I mean, I think he tried really hard to get through to Beth's mother and get them to come together. And it never happened. She wanted to be without him for reasons we don't know, other than her madness and genius, which had come together and made her kind of crazy. But so the grief, and we see her dealing with that in many ways, and maybe this kind of also slides right into the next thing of the detachment. She never really had these relationships, these close relationships to deal with. So how did she deal with any other relationships? She kind of didn't. She put herself apart from everybody else and wouldn't make friends. Anybody have any comments about that? Did anything stick out to you about her trying to forge relationships, even at the orphanage, but even later on when she tried to go to high school, and even when she was dealing with other chess players and people wanting to befriend her?
Pam, whose hand was up first? I didn't notice. Do you know? There's
Oliver.
five hands. Okay.
Oliver.
So I keep coming back to one of the quotes that really struck me when she was talking, and she was talking to her, the magazine, Life magazine, I think it was. And her quote was, "Chess isn't always competitive. Chess can also be beautiful. It was the board I noticed first. It's an entire world of just 64 squares. I feel safe in it. I can control it. I can dominate it. And it's predictable. So if I get hurt, I only have myself to blame." And I think that's interesting, that, you know, the relationships that she could control are the ones that she focused on. And if she got hurt by those, it was her own fault. And, you know, I think, I thought that was just really striking to me, that, you know, so many things out of control within her universe, her mother, her father, her adoptive parents, you know, those things she couldn't control, but she was able to live in a world that she could control. And I think that's a coping mechanism to deal with the trauma that surrounded her.
Absolutely.
And the tragedy that surrounded her.
I wrote down the exact same quote. It really, really stood out for me. David?
Well, I think, Oliver, you're right on with regard to the trauma. I think this poor Beth suffered adverse childhood experiences throughout her upbringing, right? She had a mother who was highly functioning in college, wrote a PhD paper, and was later on very dysfunctional and was living a life that was not very comfortable for some. She lost her father. She lost her mother in the car accident. She went into the orphanage, and people could not give her what she needed. They couldn't make her feel safe, or they couldn't offer her safety. I mean, they didn't even, you know, after a 2 to 5 minute orientation of the orphanage, Beth was expected to know when to be everywhere and what to do. It was crazy. Even meeting the custodian in the basement, he was a man of few words and didn't really communicate to her very well. And all of that is part of chronic trauma, chronic neglect, and chronic trauma that she suffered. And yeah, she turned to chess for control, but she also turned to the drugs and alcohol because it's the one thing she could control in her life. It actually wasn't, and I'd love someone to debate me on this, it actually wasn't until she entered the chess scene that people could be trusted. And it was really weird, because when she first went to that chess tournament and the two twin brothers were telling her very, very directly, "You're a woman, you're a beginner, you can't do this." It was the first time in her life, at least as depicted in this show, that someone was telling her the truth, right? It was telling her, hey, this is the way it's going to be. And we're not sugarcoating it. We're not keeping anything from you. We're telling you the truth. even when, for example, the head of the orphanage, when the family came to look at her, she just said, "Oh, go run along now, little dear," or whatever her quote was. No one was telling her anything and making her feel safe. Even later on, when she built that comradeship with all the other chess players, and I don't know if I want to get ahead of this too linearly or not, but when Benny basically told her, "Hey, you blew it. You blew that one move," she was vicious to herself, right? She didn't see it, and she beat up on herself, and she was overwhelmed in shame, but she respected him for telling her the truth. And those were the only people in that chess world who were telling her the truth. That's when she started coming out of the trauma. Yeah, she was medicating it, self-medicating it the whole time with the sedatives, benzodiazepines, and alcohol. And it's sad that the only freedom she ever had, as evidenced by her dancing around, was when she was so inebriated on those chemicals and alcohol. But she's finally getting to see some reality versus those people who I think neglected her by not helping her to feel safe, not communicating to her what was expected of her, what her assets were, et cetera.
That's a great point. MK Ryan posted, and I was thinking this before that was posted, the structure of not only chess, but the competitive chess world was so comforting. It's almost like all of the chess world gave her the structure that she needed to start to deal with her trauma, like you said, David, so eloquently. Kelly?
Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand. I think my hand just stayed up. Sorry.
You just have to click it off, I think. Marla?
I guess just in the friendship realm, one of the scenes that struck me was when she was invited, I think it was like a sorority or some sort of join that club thing. And, she enters in and just, I don't know, just like the whole other world of these girls and how trivial everything just seems to go so quickly as she walks in. Like, you have no idea of my world of what real life is like outside, and these girls all in their coming from, I guess, their normal families and what was important to them. And it was just so stark, the contrast between them and her world. And I just, as an adoptee, recognize that so often as you walk into situations and people are just so oblivious to what it feels like, or, it's just like a whole different world. Like I've been into, especially celebrations, like at Christmas or at other situations where people just are talking about family and they forget that you're adopted and you're not part of that, whatever that conversation is, even littlest things like, when people point out, your hands are just like someone else's hands, or they might make a mention of one little thing to someone else, and I don't know, it just strikes your heart a bit more than anyone else, because you often don't have those details in your life if you don't have your birth family information or things like that. And so just that scene just struck me, like a lot of scenes.
Me too. It was so painful to watch. It was
right. It was really, they did such a good job because, like you said, Marla, when she walked in that room, I felt it. I felt it. And did people who are not adoptees watching it feel it like we did? I don't think so. I mean, I felt just like you did, like, wow, she just is looking at them. She's such an outsider, not just because, of the chess or her interest, because she's an adoptee and she doesn't know how to connect, for one. She didn't know how to connect with normal people. So that was really kind of painful to watch. It felt painful for me. Triggering. Yeah. Did anybody else?
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just put in the chat that the games where I was able to calm down. It seems like my entire being was just always on edge. Like every time she was interacting with people, and even when she was, using her drugs, I just felt like it was for her. It was self-medicating, solving her issue of being able to calm herself, to deal with probably the same thing that her mom was dealing with, you know, just the way that her brain was operating, you know. They were at savant level, I guess, or how do you put it, genius level in the way that they were mathematically inclined. And so with it seemed to have come different things. So just even her trying to calm, you know, to self-medicate, to try to just be, was like, I was on edge with her until like sitting at a game and even listening to the interactions at the game board is where I kind of was able to calm down.
Yeah,
break from the drama, more drama, to break from the drama.
well, and the very first scene of the show, the very first episode, I mean, it's a kind of it's a flash forward where she's in her hotel room and they're trying to wake her up, and she's clearly super hungover and had partied all night. We don't know the whole story surrounding that situation until later in the series, but she's a mess. And she needs to be there. She's late for playing that big match. And she gets up and she looks in the bed, and we know somebody's there. We don't know who at the time. And I mean, it's just a mess. I mean, you know that she's been drinking all night and probably doing her drugs and just a mess. And she just stops and focuses and puts on her shoes and walks out there and plays that match. And so in a way, that detachment for her at that time, and I think for a lot of adoptees too, the detachment is a strength. You can put all of that uncomfortableness aside. And that was really jarring for me, that very first scene, you know, dealing with chaos, or you know that your life is chaos for one reason, but then having to go and deal with something that's very important or very somber, and putting on, you know, a face that shows everybody that everything's okay. That really struck me, that scene, both times. Well, and actually the next theme that we were going to talk about, we kind of already touched on, was the substance abuse and the alcoholism, where the substance abuse, I mean, yeah, the drugs and the tranquilizers start early for her, and it's not her fault, at the orphanage. And they're given to her, and she takes them as vitamins. And Jolene tells her to, you know, when to take them, when they're going to benefit her the most. They'll help you sleep. And they help her sleep, but they actually help her fuel her chess superpowers. And so she starts to rely on them, she thinks, as a child, because for that reason. So she's relying on them physically also, because she's taking them every day, or saving them up and taking them when she thinks she needs them. So she becomes addicted it's not her own fault. Not that it's anyone's fault, addiction isn't, but I'm saying at such a young age to be given these tranquilizers was devastating for that reason. And then alcohol later to blur the edges of her new reality, being adopted and watching her mother drink. So she didn't have a chance. I mean, for her, that was normal, the addiction. And she had a use for it. She thought that it helped her with the chess. Does anybody have any thoughts on that, or Lynn? Oh, Lynn, you're muted. Oh, David has his hand up.
Hi, me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. I just had a thought. Hey there. I thought that they oversimplified, or I don't know how to say it exactly, and I'm wondering if other people felt the same way. The addiction part, like you brought up how she was late for the match, but then she kind of pulled herself together and she was able to focus. And then like she would take the drugs at night and then go through all of the different moves. And like maybe in the beginning, I mean, I'm in recovery, and maybe in the beginning it might give you some clarity, but after a while into your addiction, I don't think you're able to have that much clarity, or like there would definitely be some repercussions. She wouldn't be as sharp. I think they downplayed the addiction part of it, because she would not have been able to get through those difficult matches having, you know, been high the night before, or, you know, been on a bender recently.
That's a great point.
Mm.
Yeah, Angela Miller. Turn off your, yeah, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I raised my hand a while back when we were talking about friends that she made friends with. If you look at it, Jolene is the only female friend besides her adoptive mother. She has the entire series. And for those of you who haven't seen the end, that's her main friends are male. And her first friend at the orphanage was Mr. Scheibel. And if you think about what she was looking for at the time was a father figure, because she knew what her mother figure was like. She was the one that purposely had the car accident in order to, you know, end her life. But so she gets there and she has all these friends now, probably more kids than she had been exposed to previously. We don't know what her school situation was before that, but now she's suddenly around all these children, and she navigates the basement and finds Mr. Scheibel and strikes up a friendship with him. And she never knew her father. And so then I thought, then that behavior was kind of repeated then throughout with the various people that she did make friends with. Were all chess players. There were other female chess players, but the majority of them were male, and she had that connection with the men. But if you even think about the one other young girl she plays early on, and later when she comes back to the school and is asked to speak at that school, the girl comes in and says, I just wanted to let you know I've been thinking about you, and you really had a great impact on my life. And of course, at that point, she's really stoned out of her gourd and can't really connect with her. But I thought it's interesting because she always connected with the men, and, you know, not knowing her father and not ever having that answer, I thought was interesting that she connected with the men more.
Yeah, that's a great point, Angela. I noticed she was super awkward with the other female chess player when they were in the bathroom.
Right.
Really trying to help her. You know, she gave her a sanitary pad, and Beth didn't know what to do with it. And I noticed she didn't ask for help.
Right.
She just threw it in the trash.
Yeah. And
So
she just
did not do any female bonding. She was, until the lady from France, I think they connected, but
yeah,
mainly
that's
on
true.
the hall level. That was a partying relationship, I think.
Yeah.
David B.
Yeah, I hope I'm not jumping in too much. I certainly relate to the discussion about trauma, and addiction is really complex by itself, but it's made even much more complex when there's trauma or relinquishment involved. And David P's comment earlier about them downplaying the role of addiction in their everyday life, I understand why someone would see that. I take it back to the beginning, right? When her friend Jolene, her new friend Jolene at the orphanage, was suggesting to her, you know, take these green pills only at night because they're going to affect you. And then don't take them every day, save them up for a little bit. You know, so the first time she took the green one, she was groggy and bouncing off of things during the day, yet that wasn't enough for her to stop. As a matter of fact, she figured out a system that would make her feel better or whole or in control. She even said, I like the way it feels. And to me, that was the first indication that the show gave us that she had an addiction problem, right? I don't know about you guys. I'm married to a woman who, back in the days before I stopped drinking, if we were out at a social event, she'd maybe have one drink. If she ever had a second drink, ordered a second drink, she wouldn't drink it. And I'd say, well, aren't you going to finish that? And she'd say, no, I'm starting to feel it. And of course, my point is, that's the whole point. It's supposed to feel it. That's what someone who has a problem with addiction has. Similarly, maybe some of you know people who've had surgery, or many of you yourselves have had surgery where your doctor has prescribed some type of opiate pain medication. You took one or two, you didn't like the way they made you feel, so you stopped them even though you still had pain. This was not Beth's point. Beth's point was she found a medication for an ailment she didn't even know she had. Right, that disconnection, that traumatization, that developmental interruption that later carried on into her life, and it affected her in a very dysfunctional way in terms of every relationship that she had, except for that relationship she was building with chess, although it was arguably interrupted with that. But it got more complex over time. As she actually built relationships with human beings, her relationships with the alcohol and the chemicals got even more complex because people who were telling her the truth were now telling her she's got a problem and she's got to stop, and she didn't know how to deal with that.
Yeah, I'm glad you chimed in, David, both Davids, on that issue. Because, I mean, I think seeing it, you can see it in so many, not so many, but in different ways. I mean, you know, I saw her, you know, with the alcohol, starting with drinking the alcohol, just kind of mirroring what her mother did. This is what you do, you know, when you know, and then that became an addiction. You know, it kept going too, just like the pills, and getting worse. And then when she saw that her mother also had the pill addiction, and her mother was taking the same prescription, okay, I'm going to keep going, you know, and she didn't even try to stop until, well, she did stop, I guess, when Benny came around, and she kind of, Benny was her mentor. She tried to stop. She stopped for a little while, didn't she? I can't remember in the series what made her go back. And she did go back and start using again, didn't she, after that with the situation with Benny? Yeah, I'm glad you guys chimed in, because I'm no expert on on that. Anybody else on that subject? What else? Well, we talked a little bit already, but one of the things we wanted to talk a little bit more about was her identity issues and morphing, the chameleon effect, as some of us like to call it, how she tries to fit in, like when she went to the slumber party, but she couldn't relate to any of the girls. We already talked about that. And no matter where she went or who she was with, she was always trying to morph and adapt, but the only constant was the chess. Concealing her addiction because she knew she couldn't fit in if everybody knew. And it's only when her mask slipped do we see how much the trauma has affected her. And the identity issues, the mirroring and the morphing, what struck me was after her mother died, and she went to a chess match, and she met Benny again. This was early on in her relationship with Benny, and she actually took her mother's bathrobe with her to this chess match. And when she went back to play chess with Benny, and she laid this robe out on her bed and went and played and ended up losing, she came back and was very upset. And I don't know what upset her, whether she, I don't really know what upset her, and maybe we aren't supposed to know, but she was so upset and she was crying, and it was because she lost to Benny. These matches that didn't even matter. It wasn't a tournament. They were just playing for fun, speed chess. She came back and was in tears and had a breakdown, had a meltdown, and pulled the robe up and wrapped it around her as if she were hugging it, you know, as if that were her mother, or the mother that she wanted it to be, you know, wanted her adoptive mother to be. That really struck me. And I don't know, that scene really struck me. Does anybody else have a scene about, or something that struck them about how she would morph or mirror somebody?
The whole bathrobe scene. This is Angela. Yeah. When her adoptive father comes back to negotiate, to renege on the house deal that he had previously said, I don't want the house, it's yours, take it. She met him at the door wearing the mother's bathrobe. Right. And that was an obvious insertion of representing her mother, who did care for her, who had been there for her. But then you talked about the mirroring. I saw the mirroring is really interesting. When she was watching the older girls and boys when she was in the orphanage, flirting and smoking cigarettes, the ones that weren't part of the orphanage, and she saw how they were interacting, and then when she later went to school when she was adopted, and she saw what they were doing, also what the girls were wearing. They made fun of her not for her shoes, and she didn't have the cool saddle shoes. And so her first thing she got, besides a chess set with her winnings, was new clothing to match what the girls were wearing, and then the shoes, which was important. She wanted to fit in.
I think it was also her way of kind of flipping the bird to all of them. Like,
yeah,
I can afford all of this now. Look at me. I am stylish. I'm a woman in a man's sport.
Yeah.
And I'm woman, hear me roar.
Yeah. There was one thing that we didn't talk about. We talked about her detachment, but this was a big issue for me. Not a big issue, but just something that really stuck out to me on her detachment and the way she dealt with her sexuality. And, I read a review of the series that said that called her very powerful, and that she was a very modern woman back in that day. And she was very strong and just treated men, however she wanted to. And that was very strong of her. And I mean, I disagreed with that so much. And I think Lynn and I talked about this, and it was like, no, it wasn't that at all. She didn't know how. She was very detached. And like the first time that she had sex with Harry, and when he had come after her mother died, and he was the only one that showed up for her, came back, and he wasn't even playing chess anymore. And he had fallen in love with her. And I don't know that he admitted that to her right away, but it was clear that he wanted more from her, more of a relationship. And she just kept him, at arm's length and said, yeah, you can help me out with the chess. And they did that for a few days. He moved in there, staying there. And after a few days, I don't remember how long it was, but they finally, had sex. And afterwards, he said, he looked at her. She just sat up in the bed, had a cigarette, lit it, and started reading the chess books again. And he looked at her and said, do you want me to go back to my room, or should I stay here? And she said, whatever you want. And just so detached. And it was really striking to me. And she kept doing that, not just with her, sexual relationships, but she just did that with her friends too. She was really mean, I thought, to her friends. And that was her way of keeping everybody at bay. And that's why at the end, it was puzzling to me how or why they all came together for her, these men who she treated really poorly. I mean, it surprised me that in the end they did all come back together for her. But she was a master at the detachment, I thought, and that we didn't talk about that. I don't know if anybody else wants to talk about that, her promiscuity, maybe you want to call it, or her sexuality, and how she really detached from that, as she did with all the other relationships she had.
One of the things I noticed, Laureen, was how I was really disappointed that she never paid Mr. Scheibel, as I say it, back his money, and how she didn't truly appreciate the gift that he gave her, and didn't even recognize that he cared about her until he died. That was disappointing for me. I mean, I'm glad she finally came to the realization, but yeah, I wish she would have sent him the money back.
Yeah, or kept in touch somehow,
Yeah.
and recognized that he was really a father figure, even though it was all about the chess. He really was the only father figure that she had.
And I loved that scene where the reporter takes the photo of the two of them together, and she, at the last second, puts her hand on his shoulder. And that's the picture on his billboard later when she comes back.
Yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts?
Kim has her hand up.
Kim?
Hi, everyone. I'm going to have to go back and watch this show again. So I watched the whole thing, but as I'm listening to all of you, I'm thinking out loud on something related to what the two Davids said in relationship to addiction and her functioning so well with chess, and then the detachment and other things. So that what I'm thinking out loud is, has anyone wondered or thought about if she perhaps was on this, has Asperger's, is on the spectrum, autism spectrum?
I had not thought that, but I mean,
Yes, I thought that the whole way through, and
Yeah.
I read a article with Anya Taylor-Joy, and she even said she mentioned that as that she brought that part to the acting because she thought for her to be so incredibly focused and everything, with the genius that she had. So I think so. And her
Yeah.
mom probably did as well.
Yeah. So the drugs may have been a combination of,
helping her focus.
Being given them to her when she was young, but then, to manage anxiety related to either or both trauma and the, all that comes along with being on the spectrum. But I have to watch it again because I'm not sure if I.
Angela, you said that the actress did an interview about that?
Yep. There's it was so marvelously directed that my family watched it also through those eyes, and we talked about it a lot. And so I went and read a whole bunch of different articles, and she actually, she's the actress. Anya was the one that decided that her hair should be red because she was going to be such a strange, freakish girl in an in an odd world anyway. Being a chess player in a male-dominated world, being an orphan and later an adoptee, that she wanted her to really stick out like a sore thumb. So she said, "Oh, her hair has to be red." And so, but she did feel that and a lot of her micro expressions and things that she did, I thought were really good. That she just kind of, you could tell she didn't understand other people's feelings. Often.
Right.
She didn't know how to read people.
Oh. Very interesting observation that I did not pick up on. Did you, Laureen?
Yeah,
No,
that was some of what I was thinking, where it could be viewed as mirroring, or it could be viewed as Laureen's scripts and just making whatever effort to fit in, or appear normal, quote unquote, whatever normal is.
I didn't think about the Asperger's, but that's totally possible too. I mean, she was a genius in definitely the chess, the one thing she focused on, and couldn't really relate to people. How much of that do you attribute to possibly Asperger's or possibly just being adopted and not having any relationships growing up? I mean, it could be that she had some of that too.
But I think it's overtly not addressed as Asperger's because, I mean, that wasn't a terminology that was used during that time period. They just, attributed it to people that are strange, and that they just don't relate. And I think, the series purposely did that in that, these were, she probably had Asperger's, but people didn't know exactly how to deal with it. And people came up with coping mechanisms. So
I did
wonder
if she did not.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I noticed she wasn't really engaged in any of the activities at the orphanage. And I thought, well, it must be because she's so smart. And some of those lessons they were teaching, like that really dumb movie they were playing when she stole the medicine. I was like, this has got to be the worst movie ever. And some of the lessons that she was learning, I would have wanted to leave and take the erasers to the basement too. But I think those are some great observations that maybe she was on the spectrum. And she was just so different that it was that people, they didn't have, you're right, Oliver, they didn't have the words for it. I don't know what it would have been called back then, but, maybe it didn't matter as long as she got adopted, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to point out too that I read an article and I posted it on my Facebook, and I think it's been posted elsewhere too. I don't have it. I think it was Michelle Merritt, right? Do you remember that one, Lynn? I mean, do you remember, is that the name?
You said that? I'll look it up while you're talking.
Yeah, Michelle Merritt, and she wrote an article on, I can't remember the platform she used either, but it's if you can find it, Lynn, it was the Queen's Gambit got everything right about adoption. And it was a really good article, and someone else had posted it in our adoption community, and I found it. And that's what really got me going about all the adoption threads throughout the series and started talking to Lynn about it. But it's a really good article if you want to look it up. Michelle Merritt, I think. And did you find it, Lynn? Oh, you're on mute.
I just stuck it in the chat. It's what the Queen's Gambit.
Oh, there it is.
Adoption.
Yeah, I found that really interesting that somebody wrote about it from our point of view. I wonder if there are articles out there about, I don't think they call it Asperger's anymore either. They call it something else, but just being on the spectrum. I wonder if people honed in on that too, and there may be articles out there about that, because this show, this series had so many layers to it. Does anybody have a layer that maybe we didn't touch on that maybe they want to talk about?
Well, can everybody hear me okay?
Natalie,
Okay.
Is this Natalie? Yeah, hi.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Natalie. I want to point out in the article that they mentioned that a lot of adoptees have gifts. So it's not necessarily like they wrote her character to be autistic and to have this like propensity to have chess or fixations on things like that. And instead it was her fixating on this thing and understanding that she can gather like respect and love and all these things that she needed at the time through chess as a venue. And like a lot of adoptees tend to do, because we like don't get that in our lives until we're seen as something to capitalize upon by adults around us usually. So that's what the article mentions, is that we're people who are adopted are often gifted and then end up like used
And using that gift to get attention or to get love or to get, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Or we are allowed to be manipulated. Is that what you're saying too, Natalie?
And that as well, yes, which you see in the show is like she's kind of used for other people's gain a lot of times as a young woman or teenager.
Great points.
Yeah.
I remember reading an article when it was posted at Lost Daughters quite a few years back by a psychologist who also stated what you're talking about, Natalie, that she sees many adoptees who are gifted. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I didn't know that before I read that article. And I thought, I wonder what it is. Is it a combination of the trauma, us, adapting, being so good at adapting to trauma? Why are we more gifted is the question I would ask.
I think overcompensation is the key here, because we do face a lot of trauma and we understand love is conditional from a young age, and that when we don't get it from our natural or first parents, that we learn to use what we are granted and be really resourceful about it, and then we like shoot in progress what people who haven't had to have the same fights in their lives,
So we look inward more for what's there, and then that's what comes out, whatever we're gifted at, I guess. That makes total sense.
Yeah, that does. So the average person would not have to tap into those resources because they're getting that from their original family.
Yeah, their needs are met.
Okay. Kim has her hand up.
Yeah, I was just I just Googled autism, maybe high functioning, autism and the Queen's Gambit. There are several articles discussing, and I haven't read any of them, obviously. Yeah, so it's a question that a lot of folks apparently have written stuff about. So
that's interesting.
Is it Angela? You had said that there were articles that you read and that your household watched it through that lens.
Yes, there was an article. There was actually, I read 2 or 3 articles and then shared them with my family. And then in my quarantine family, I'll put it that way. And then because my husband and I watched the series first, and then we loved it so much that when my daughter came back from college, we watched it with her and my sons as well. We edited a little bit here and there, but they're all teenagers, so we felt it was pretty good for them to watch. And the storytelling was so masterful. But we have people not in our core family, but in our extended family, who certainly are a bit on the spectrum, and were never diagnosed as. So we tend to recognize it, I think, when we see it a little more. And so then I listened to an actual interview if I can find them, and there's a way to post it, maybe I'll send them to Pam or somebody. But there was a online interview by Anya Taylor-Joy, who said the quote about her portraying the character as being perhaps having Asperger's.
So I have a disability, everyone, and it's a physical one, but it's very important to me that when I see disabilities being portrayed in film or in media, it's acted by a disabled person, because otherwise it's called cripping up, or when people who are not disabled it's just kind of annoying to me that they like cast somebody who doesn't have autism when there are so many great actors who do. And like so I don't know, what do y'all think about that?
I think it was just one facet of her very complicated life.
I hadn't thought about it from that perspective, Natalie, but it makes a lot of sense that somebody with Asperger's would have that opportunity, since they've lived it. Just like we always say, we have lived experience as adoptees. We don't want other people to speak for us, you know?
I was thinking that too, Lynn. It's like when I first started watching the show and discovered that the main character is an adoptee, I thought, well, here we go. This is going to be another typical Hollywood story, you know, not real, not true, not really dealing with what we may be experiencing. But
and she's going to be so grateful. She's going to be
right. The grateful, yeah. It was really good. So I was surprised that they were able to do that, or that they did that. It's like, I know Barbara will relate to this, because I know she watches This Is Us. We talked about it before on one of these Zoom meetings, but the same thing. There must be somebody in the writing staff, or who this, the Queen's Gambit is from a book. It's and somebody who, I don't know how they got it right, but they got a lot of the themes and the threads right about adoption, just like they did. I believe they did in This Is Us, the series This Is Us on television. So that was exciting for me. I mean, I enjoyed that, and seeing them deal with it in a realistic way. Gosh, do we have any other themes that we were going to talk about? I know Lynn wanted to talk about the ending and how everybody came together for her at the end. Lynn, you want to talk about that and what happened to her and how that all came about? And
sure. The triggering event for the climax, I would say, of the show is when Mr. Scheibel died and Jolene comes back, and they go back to the orphanage, and she starts to see things from more of an adult perspective. And she recognizes that Mr. Scheibel had followed her entire career and had all those pictures of her hung up, which I have to say, it made me cry. I just thought, oh, he really was a father figure to her. And so then, she's getting ready to go to Russia. Jolene's willing to lend her the money, which that was pretty big. Hadn't seen her in all those years. She got over there, and she had that guy who was assigned to her by the US government. And I don't remember what his name was, but he was really annoying. He kept bossing her around, telling her what to do. And I just really loved the ending when she decided to leave that car and disobey the guy who told her, you need to go to this lunch and you need to go to the airport, or whatever he instructed. And she's like, pull the car over, I'm getting out. And then she's walking, through the center of town with all those men who are just playing chess for fun. And she sits down, and I just love that, because it reminded me so much of the adoption community for me. Like, all the people that rallied around her, the guys, the chess guys, and all the people that were there just to play chess. You know, it wasn't a competition. It was just, we're doing this for fun. It just reminded me of the adoption community. So.
Yeah, during the match, how everyone came together and how surprised she was. Like, wow, these people really care for me. And like I said before, she was really cruel to some of those guys in the series. She was. I guess it was kind of hard for me to swallow in the end how they all came together for her, and they're talking to her on the phone and cheering her on, and then they were there, and they were there for her. I get that. That reminded me of the adoption community. Somehow they related to her, and I guess for them it was through the chess. But her walls kind of finally were broken down, and I think that was after the death of Mr. Scheibel, which is sad. I wish it would have happened before then somehow, because it would have been nice for her to reunite with him on some level and realize the value of him, before he died. But
right, she could no longer tell herself the story that she was by herself and that nobody cared, which we could all get into that story if we don't have a good relationship with our adoptive families, and maybe our birth families have rejected us. We can all feel like super isolated, and we can forget that we have people like the people in this room who can, hold us up when things get bad.
Yeah.
David, Bull?
I think Angela was before Angela, do you have your hand up?
Whoever.
Hi. I was just going to say someone touched on this earlier, that I was the first time through, I was very wary of what abuse was the adoptive mother going to give her, just because that's how it's portrayed. I did not have that situation in my house growing up, but so often it's portrayed that way. And so when she started doing things like, well, I'll be your manager, and this is how much money we can spend, and doing that, the first time through, I thought, okay, how bad is this going to get? Like, at what point is it going to become a real problem? Now, after I watched it the second time and saw how it ended up, and we kind of talked about that earlier, it was a little bit of a two-way street, because she was also playing, Beth was playing the adult role. Beth was taking care of her mother, but there was that friendship. Her mother wanted to see her succeed, and was knew that her piano skills had been underdeveloped or not promoted, and she wanted to promote Beth's skills. That it wasn't until the second time I watched it with the kids that I could relax every time that was happening. Because the first time I kept thinking, oh my gosh, what's she going to do? What big thing is she going to do to exploit Beth and her skill that will make their relationship sour? But it didn't, so I was happy about that.
yeah, I kept waiting for something bad to happen to her, for somebody to do something bad to her, but that never happened. Everything that happened bad to her, she brought on herself, kind of in a way, or because she was adopted and because of the detachment and all of that. But I mean, nobody overtly, hurt her, right? And that's, I get it. I was kind of expecting that too, because that's the old adoptee, yarn you see in the stories, right?
I would say the adoptive father overtly hurt her just because he was selfish and took back his promise. But I like how she tapped into her own power and handled him.
Yes, in the end, she did. She
really did.
Yeah.
She showed him.
Yeah.
David?
Yeah, I just want to remark upon what you were talking about a moment ago, Lynn, and that was when she, after Scheibel's death, she went down into his area down in the basement and saw all the clippings and all the photographs and whatnot. And you said, boy, how sad that was, that she realized after his death that she was important to somebody. But I think that was the beginning of her massive awakening, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we talk about this all the time in adoptee circles, and the Indiana Adoptee Network does a wonderful job of providing forums for this. We always talk about getting together with our tribe, finding people who make us feel safe and who can validate our experiences, whatnot. And that's exactly what he did in the beginning. He was that one person in her life who accepted her as she fully was, and actually found something valuable and unique in her. And that was a big deal. And that was different than the people who turned into her fans and the adoring fans seeking autographs in Russia and all that adulation was totally different than that self-respect that he taught her, and I guess the acceptance that he saw her. And when she saw that wall, the awakening was, you're right, it was, oh my gosh, I'm liked, I'm enough. And it's the first time in that entire series that we felt that way. And it opened the door to have these relationships with these other people, including the crescendo that you talked about, including
Right.
accepting help from a group of people she might not have even called friends, who were truly her friends, who knew what she needed even before she did, and they gave it to her, right? And they gave her this self-acceptance that she had never experienced before. So thanks for illustrating that.
Also, I don't know that she would have won in Russia without them. You know, they were actively trying to coach her and teach her how to, you know, win in Russia. I don't know. What does anybody else think? Do you think she would have been able to do it alone?
No, she would not.
I mean, she needed her community to succeed. And I think that's a really great lesson.
Yep, and that was kind of the story of the Cold War, where you saw the Russians were all wanting to beat the Americans, so they were willing to work together, and they made the point early on that Americans were out for themselves and could never work together. And so that's a whole different thing. That's a Cold War theme, nationalism and things like that. But it was interesting. I mean, we were all cheering when they all came together. I think that's, she saw she could rely on other people. And
it did play in though earlier on, you know, she saw Borgev's, was that his name? Borgov or whatever his name is, in the hotel room, you know, with his buddies, his chess buddies, and they were all talking about strategy and her moves the prior day, or at the game she played with the other participants or her other opponents, and they were going over, and then she kind of like was puzzled by that. She's looking in there thinking, what are they doing? What are they talking about? You know, and she didn't have anybody. She was on her own. So yeah, that hit me too. She still didn't have it in her head what it was like to have a tribe, like David said, or have a group of people that you really trust and that care. Yeah.
And another thing about Mr. Scheibel is he really didn't have anything to gain. He helped Beth, and he didn't have to. Like, he was not getting money, or, you know, he wasn't gaining anything. So I think that was really important because, you know, as she became more famous, people started to exploit her.
Yeah. Well, does anybody else have anything they want to talk about the series? Anything we may have overlooked, or just want to talk about? Anything fun about it, or that stuck out for them?
I appreciate everyone's participation. This has been really enlightening, and I thought Laureen and I had covered it all through our own discussions. We've talked on the phone, we've Marco Polo'd, we've emailed, we've texted, and I was surprised we still heard some things tonight that the two of us didn't even.
Yeah, we didn't think of.
We didn't even get it. It shows you how.
Ladies did an awesome job, and we really appreciate you having this wonderful idea and bringing this to our happy hour. If all of you out there like this evening, please feel free to leave your comments. If you'd like to see more programs like tonight, like maybe there are some other movies, or maybe you have someone that you would like for us to invite to come to a happy hour, please feel free to reach out to myself, Pam Krosky, or Jennifer. We're happy to help. We really enjoy these calls on Monday and Friday nights. We're glad to have each and every one of you here. So we do appreciate that. Also, again, just as a reminder, we do have a Facebook page called Adoption Happy Hour. And if you're not following us, please feel free to reach out, and you can also continue this discussion. And this call that's being recorded will also be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and you'll be able to revisit this again. So with that in mind, again, girls, thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Pam for a final closing. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for joining us. It was not our usual night, but thanks for being here tonight. I know everybody's probably starting to wind down, and I'm starting to nod. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not nodding up. I don't know if everybody saw our note on our IN main Facebook page about our good friend Kathy Coley, about her mom. If those of you who know Arlene, that she joins us most of our happy hour nights. Arlene has cancer. So those of you that would like to reach out to her, actually reach out to Kathy, feel free to do so. And then Kathy can tell you how to reach out to her mom. She just found out. So the Facebook page has a more detailed description of the cancer and more of that. But we were sad to hear that. And, you know, it's not always a good thing, obviously, to hear something like that around the holidays or anytime. But as we said, Arlene's been joining us, and we're really sad to hear that, both for Kathy and Arlene. So our thoughts are with both of them. And, you know, we would like to maybe do some kind of dedication and something like that. So something more to come for those two. But thanks again, you guys, for being with us. And Lynn and Laureen, thank you very much for doing such an amazing job. I watched it, and like you guys said, they brought up things I didn't even remember or thought. So now I need to go back and watch it again.
We
But
enjoyed it, Laureen.
Yeah.
Didn't you?
Yeah.
Great.
We love talking about shows that we watch. It's so much fun. It's like a book club for TV shows.
Yeah. I think Jennifer just put the message up so you guys can read in the chat. But yeah, I think I need to do that more though. Like I'll watch something and I never go back and watch it again. Why I don't do that? You can pick up so many more things when you watch something again. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. And you guys did a great job. And
thank you.
Appreciate you guys.
Thanks.
Jen, do we have a slide for? Yeah, I knew it was coming. Okay.
There you go. This is for next Friday, right? The 15th.
The 15th, not
Right.
this coming Friday.
No,
So
not this Friday, but next Friday.
15th
Yeah.
with Suzanne and the Good Adoptee. So you'll be hearing a lot more about that. We're real excited about this one.
Yes, this was one of our conference plays, and it was amazing. If those of you who got to be there, so we'll give you more information on this coming up. All right, guys, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Thank
Everybody.
you.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Guys.
Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.